Before we come to Prime Minister's questions, I would like to point out that the British Sign Language interpretation of proceedings is available to watch on Parliament Live TV. We now start with questions to the Prime Minister.
Number one, Mr. Speaker.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, today I'm wearing a purple tie in recognition of the International Day of People with Disabilities this coming Friday. In July, we published the UK's first national disability strategy to help create a society that works for everybody. Mr. Speaker, I know that the thoughts of the whole House will be with those continuing to face disruption caused by Storm Arwen. My right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, will update the House on the continuing response to Storm Arwen after these questions. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister and I have a shared commitment to protecting our natural environment and improving our biodiversity across the country. Indeed, it's why I'm campaigning to extend the Chilterns area of natural beauty towards the southwest of Hitchin. Would my right honourable friend set out how he plans to strengthen the protections for our countryside, whilst also ensuring that housing developments are both green and sustainable for the long term?
Prime Minister.
Yes, indeed, Mr. Speaker. I can tell my honourable friend that Natural England is considering an extension of the Chilterns area of outstanding natural beauty, and I'm sure they will listen to his passionate appeal very carefully.
We now come to the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I join the Prime Minister in his words on disability and the victims of extreme weather? Can I also mark World AIDS Day? Extraordinary advances mean people living with HIV on effective treatment can now enjoy normal life expectancy and are no longer at risk of passing on the virus. It's within our hands to end new transmissions in the UK this decade. We must do so, Mr. Speaker. As millions of people were locked down last year, was a Christmas party thrown in Downing Street for dozens of people on December the 18th?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, what I can tell the right honourable gentleman is that all guidance was followed completely during Number 10. And can I recommend to the right honourable gentleman that he does the same with his own Christmas party, which he's advertised for December the 15th, to which unaccountably he's failed to invite the deputy leader, Mr. Speaker.
Nice try, but that won't work. Mr. Speaker, the defence seems to be no rules were broken. Well, I've got the rules that were in place at the time Prime Minister of this party. They're very clear, Mr. Speaker. You must not have a work Christmas lunch or party. Does the Prime Minister really expect the country to believe that while people were banned from seeing their loved ones at Christmas last year, it was fine for him and his friends to throw a boozy party in Downing Street?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I've said what I've said about Number 10 and the events of 12 months ago, but since he asked about what we're asking the country to do this year, Mr. Speaker, which I think is, frankly, a more relevant consideration. The important thing to do, Mr. Speaker, is not only to follow the guidance which we have set out, but also when it comes to dealing with the Omicron variant, to make sure that, as we've said, that you wear a mask on public transport and in shops, Mr. Speaker, and that you self-isolate if you come into contact with somebody who has Omicron, Mr. Speaker. And above all, what we're doing is strengthening our measures at the borders, but particularly, and I think this would be very valuable for everybody to hear, get your booster, Mr. Speaker. I know the right honourable gentleman is eligible for his booster. I'm not going to ask him, Mr. Speaker, since I'm forbidden to ask him questions, but I hope very much that he's had it.
Well, I can tell the Prime Minister I've had mine. Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister says we should concentrate on what he's asking the country to do. We're asking the country to follow the rules. Yep. Now, the Prime Minister doesn't deny there was a Downing Street Christmas party last year. He's not denied it. He says no rules were broken. Both of those things can't be true, Prime Minister. He's taking the British public for fools. And as for following the rules, Prime Minister, it might be good just to look behind you when it comes to the question of masks. As ever, one rule for them, another rule for everybody else. Mr. Speaker, at the last election, the Prime Minister promised to build 40 new hospitals. 40 new hospitals. Page 10 of his manifesto. With waiting lists so high, Prime Minister, it's a very, very important commitment. Now, the Cabinet Office and the Treasury have checked on progress, and it's reported that they've reached a damning conclusion. I know the Chancellor would have seen that. They've concluded that the project needs a red flag because it's unachievable. Prime Minister, is that true?
Prime Minister.
No, Mr. Speaker. We're getting on with... He plays politics and asks frivolous questions, Mr. Speaker. We're getting on with delivering on the people's priorities, and we're putting record investments into the NHS on top of the 34 billion with which we began, and then the 97 billion that we put in to fight COVID. We, Mr. Speaker, are helping to build another 40 new hospitals with an injection of £36 billion of investment, Mr. Speaker, which that party voted against.
Keir Starmer.
Well, this is strange, Mr. Speaker, because the government hasn't been denying the reports about the red flag, and they haven't done since, but now the Prime Minister does. There's obviously some confusion on these benches over whether the Cabinet Office and the Treasury think he's on course to break yet another promise, this time on new building of hospitals. So he can clear this up this afternoon. If he's so confident in his answer, why doesn't he publish the progress report in full and let us all see it?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, what we're doing is not only building 40 new hospitals, but we are also, and it's incredible that we've been able to keep going throughout the pandemic, Mr. Speaker, but we're also making record investments in our, yes it is, and we're also making record investments in our NHS. We have more doctors, more nurses working in our NHS than at any time in the history of that magnificent organisation. And rather than running down what they're trying to do, Mr. Speaker, and casting doubt on their efforts, he should get behind them, and he should support our booster campaign.
Well, Mr. Speaker, there we have it. Prime Minister, I deny my hospital building programme has been flagged red as unachievable, but I don't have the confidence to publish the report. Mr. Speaker, the more we look at this promise, the murkier it gets. I've got a document here sent by the Department of Health to the NHS. It's called the New Hospital Programme Communications Playbook. I kid you not. It offers advice, Mr. Speaker, to make it easier to talk about the programme. Now, you might think that everyone knows what a new hospital is. I certainly thought I knew what a new hospital is before I read this document. But this guide instructs everybody to describe refurbishments and alterations on existing hospitals as new hospitals. We can all agree that refurbishments are a very good thing, but they're not new hospitals. So, Prime Minister, how many of the 40 are fix-up jobs on existing hospitals, and how many are actually the new hospitals he promised?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, you obviously don't always go around building on greenfield sites. What we are doing is massive. you rebuild hospitals, and that is what we have said for the last 2.5 years, Mr. Speaker. It is the biggest programme of hospital building this country has ever undertaken. It's being made possible by this People's Government, and it's in addition to what we're doing with the community diagnostics hubs, Mr. Speaker, and it's in addition to what we're doing in investing in our NHS. And I said it once, but I'll say it again. They had the opportunity to vote for that $36 billion. They turned it down, Mr. Speaker. We're getting on with the people's priorities. They're playing politics.
And no wonder so many Tory donors paid so much for that wallpaper last year. It probably told them it was building a new flat. It's the same old story from this Prime Minister, week in, week out, defending the indefensible and broken promises. His mates were found to be corrupt. He tried to get them off the hook. Downing Street throws parties during lockdown. He says, not a problem. He promised there'd be no tax rises. Then he put up tax. He promised there'd be a rail revolution in the north. Then he cancelled the trains. He promised no one would have to sell their home for care. Then along came his working-class dementia tax. He promised 40 new hospitals, and even if you count the paint jobs, his own watchdog says he can't deliver it. Isn't this the truth, Mr. Speaker, that any promises from this Prime Minister aren't worth the manifesto paper they're written on?
Mr. Speaker, the right honourable gentleman dribbles on irrelevantly about wallpaper and parties playing politics. And by the way, on that, I'm told that when the Deputy Leader and Shadow Secretary of State for the Future of Work was told that she wasn't invited, she denounced it. She denounced it as idiotic, childish, and pathetic. Mr. Speaker, they're getting on with factional. They're getting on with factional infighting. We are delivering for the people of this country. Today, cutting tax for the lowest paid people in this country. As a result of our universal credit changes, 1.9 million families getting £1,000 more in their pay packets this year. The biggest programme of rail infrastructure this century, Mr. Speaker. 3 new high-speed lines, and we're fixing social care. They have no plan whatever, Mr. Speaker. And don't forget, their resort to absolutely every problem is either to take this country back into lockdown or to open up to uncontrolled immigration, Mr. Speaker. That is their approach. We are delivering on the people's priorities, and we have more people in work now as a result of the balanced and proportionate approach that we are taking than we had before the pandemic began. And if we listened to him, Mr. Speaker, if we listened to Captain Hindsight, we'd all still be in lockdown. And that is the truth.